doing it the first time, it's fast. So Google the first time, Facebook the first time. For people who have established franchises, I'm spending some time with our friends at Microsoft. I've spent time with people at SAP, at Cisco, whatever. It's the second time problem that I'm trying to work with, where you have the performance matrix lock-in of resources and how to play that. Because it would be great if we could use existing infrastructure to deploy generation after generation instead of having to say, well, we've got to build a whole new set of companies. And my anxiety about that is the next great markets are going to be in India and China and elsewhere. If we have to build a whole new set of companies, they'll get built, but they won't get built. They won't be American companies. And I'm enough of an American chauvinist to want us to have at least some success in this new economy. And I think to do that, we have to be able to assimilate the next generation of innovation and learning how to do that. I think our mental models are wrong. And so the lack of success of established enterprises with next generation earnings engine is spectacularly bad. I mean, it's spectacular and it's bad.
Yeah, if I can throw, as one who's gone now through the full life cycle.
Are you still at Oracle?
I am still at Oracle.
Okay, so talk about
I'm gainfully employed there.
By the way, and Oracle's got a very smart CEO. So what's going on?
So there's a couple things. I worry that synergies are fool's gold. Right? I worry about that. Unless it's an operational excellence, you're far into your life cycle and you're trying to figure out how to sustain profitability in a declining market, right? So I also think that you have to separate founder-led businesses from non-founder-led businesses when trying to operationalize new acquisitions. Because founder-led businesses outperform the S&P. Founder-led businesses have people that are intimately connected with the brand and breathe the heart and life and soul into the enterprise. They and they alone are going to be successful in picking up that new flag and waving it.
Ellison,
That's right. That's right. So those are the ones that are most successful. I think...
And that's to your point about it has to be led from the CEO.
Yeah. It absolutely does, which means
and
it's hard to do too many.
Well, a hired CEO is harder too, because when you're hired as a CEO, you get the managing for shareholder value card handed to you.
Right.
And that is a code for don't add another earnings engine.
That's right. If you're managing to value, you're not going to be as willing to take on risk. It's inherently risky to divert operational resources. I call it operational distraction.
Yep.
And we had it. I'm not sure that companies can do anything new. It's really funny. I mean, we had to buy 3 different businesses to bring the DNA in and wall them off. I think the most successful model that I've seen, and Oracle's very early days, but I think they're going to be more successful than Cisco at their acquisitions. Cisco, the interesting thing about Cisco, they've spent $80 billion in the last 10 years buying businesses, and their market value is about $100 billion. So you wonder whether or not they'd be better off just providing dividends as opposed to buying these businesses. I don't know. But Oracle actually has bought as many businesses, 90 to 100 businesses, and it looks like their enterprise value over the last 10 years has performed very differently. Oracle has a business unit strategy. So when they acquire a business, they try very hard to keep it largely intact and isolated, and they run it as a P&L almost separately. And maybe that's a better model. I mean, maybe the ultimate model is GE and a holding company, and you just don't have the synergies, you just have the investment.
I think certainly for consolidating industries, for sure. And if you think about what Oracle's been doing, it's been a consolidation. The other thing you can do, which I'm interested in asking you, Andy, is you can have a new business, and instead of trying to create a new earnings engine, you revitalize an existing earnings engine. So that thing where you have that yellow star that was trying to go back to the beginning, so you say, look, you're not going to be an independent business unit. You're actually part of an existing business unit. By the way, get over the fact that you're a CEO, because you're not. You're now part of this new world, and join in. So I'm curious, with Acme Packet, where do you fit in the Oracle ecosystem, and what are they thinking about you?
So Oracle was one of the least likely people we thought to acquire us. We thought, I would have thought Ericsson, I would have thought Cisco, because we sort of do what they do. But Oracle took a different position. They said, we sell to the IT side, we don't sell to the network side. But the network business is changing. The way all the communication providers, Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, how their network's going to be built out, and the subsequent services that they're going to sell to every one of us in the room as consumers are going to require different infrastructure. And so they decided they were going to go out and start buying the pieces to bring a whole solution together to say we're going to go disrupt that market. And they're trying to jumpstart the crossing the chasm by buying more mature businesses and putting a whole solution together. Right after they bought us, they turned around and bought Techelec. Who knows who else they're going to buy? I'm not privy to that, by the way. It doesn't matter. But I mean, the point is that bigger companies, perhaps, if they buy enough mature businesses and they put a solution together, maybe they can jumpstart and avoid the pitfall of crossing the chasm.
What I'd like to do is take a moment to start the audience thinking about how they might participate and jump in with some questions here too. So, Dave, just tee yourself up for this for a second too. But I'd like, first of all, a show of hands of who in the audience is at the early stages of starting a business. Is that crossing the chasm stage? Just a show of hands there. Okay, so that's about a third or so. What about the rest of you? How many of you are at the later stage trying to innovate in this second model that Geoffrey was talking about, in part of larger companies? Same sort of number, right? Okay, so let's try to make sure we focus on a couple of those different areas. And while you think about what might be an interesting question for Geoffrey, let me pose something to you, Dave. So obviously, I know, because we're pretty lucky enough to be an investor, and you've done this multiple times before. You're a multi-time successful entrepreneur. What's your perspective on what's different this time around? You've obviously got the experience, in fact, in one case, of being exactly what Geoffrey was talking about in the RFID market, which was not an easy place to be.
No, that wasn't. That was another a chasm failed to cross or something. But prior to that, Cynernetics and Seaport, with the letter C, was one of the fabless semiconductor company, one of the first network processor companies. What's different now? I think it's as good as it's ever been. First of all, I think the opportunities in my particular space, and that you guys also invest in a lot in computing and IT infrastructure, is I think the plate tectonics are in motion today in as powerful a configuration as they have ever been. Right. Back in the mid-90s, when sort of, you say, like, somebody made a comment earlier about how did Cisco sort of drop the ball with acquisitions. I think I said, well, they used to be spectacularly good at it, right? Exactly. In fact, the history of the mid-90s was when switching took over the world. Cisco went from being, when router was a 4-letter word, Cisco came out the other side owning ultimately 85% of the market. And that was through a very aggressive M&A strategy, and they bought a lot of great companies. And it was, that, you talk about disruption, enterprise networking went from switching went from a $0 billion to a $4 billion market in the space of a couple of years.
But Dave, stay with this Michael's question for a second. So you have to build a team this time. You've done this now maybe 4 times.
4 times.
So, but you're getting track. You have a pipeline of 30 to 40 companies in 7-figure, 8-figure deals. If you were doing this 10 years ago, now fast forward to today, what has made it either easier or harder to do it this time around?
Well, I think, like, just as a practical matter, we're the beneficiaries of a decade of underinvestment.
Okay,
right?
That's right. Because there was a decade when we kind of put enterprise
there
on
literally was, and Cisco was buying flip video cameras and set-top boxes, right? And a lot of the company, Nortel is bankrupt, and Alcatel-Lucent has a market cap of $1 billion. Right? There were, so there was a little bit of scorched earth to go and farm again. But in terms of a lot of the infrastructure pieces, in terms of building a team, getting the right talent pool, starting a company, cloud services, open source. There are so many tools available to the modern entrepreneur, and the pace at which you can build a team, make that team productive, is
That's really Ali's point on leverage. Actually,
it is a point on leverage. I joked at the beginning. Our company was sort of like it was 20th century hardware and 21st century software, right? So here in the Boston area, we have a facility out in the 495 corridor where we have guys who know how to build switches and hardware, and we have a facility in Kendall Square where we have MIT postdocs that know how to do math and build algorithms and virtualization and visualization tools. All our stuff is built on Google Web Toolkit, so it works on desktops, laptops, tablets, and smartphones. The way we integrate with our technology partners, we're doing a technology integration demo a month now, all through this year, with flash storage guys and so the pace at which we develop working
This only happens in the United States. I mean, if you're worried about our innovation capability in the world, because there's going to be 100 times more engineers someplace else, there's no other country in the world that does this the way we do it. Because all other countries at the margin are skeptical of trust. And we have this business model which says trust first and then play prisoner's dilemma. But the first move is trust first, right? Whereas in many other countries, the first move is take advantage of the situation and then see what happens. And the problem is if you start prisoner's dilemma by stealing, you can never get out of prisoner's dilemma, right? Which is kind of, so I think it's actually just something to remember.
Right, what about the audience? Any questions from the audience
Yeah,
for
come on.
Geoffrey or any of the panelists? Yes.